Straight from the epicenter of the coronavirus, Seattle. We got a special guest for you today. His name's Brad Fowler. He's the host of the Pint Glass Football Podcast. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, step right up. Welcome to the latest episode of the Goonery. All right, my man Brad, what's happening?
Hey, how's it going? I'm really excited to talk some football with you today. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, thanks for coming on and listening through that shitty intro until I can lock down some music. Seattle in the background there. Doesn't look like it's on fire, but you might think otherwise looking at the news. We got a good agenda for you guys today. This guy talks football, drinks a few beers. My kind of guy. We're going to talk a little Tom Brady, a little upcoming NFL draft, and the ever so popular legalized sports gambling coming your way. Let's talk before we jump into all that good stuff. You want to give a little background on, you and your podcast and how we came to meet?
Yeah, so my podcast, hence the name, Pint Glass Football. My mantra, so to speak, is I'm just a guy who likes to drink beer and watch football, so I started a podcast. It's kind of a joke because I don't take myself too seriously, and I'm just a regular guy who really loves football, and decided I'd start talking about it with a podcast. So, with that being said, I do like to follow the games closely. I love NFL and college football, and just like to talk about both, and love to pick games and talk spreads and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, we like to talk sports definitely here on the Goonery. Always looking for content creators. Tend to be average Joes like you and me who just like shooting the shit, talking sports, and here we are. So with that said, Tom Brady, can't, talk football without, where's Tom Brady going to go? It's one of the big off-season news stories. You got any inside scoop on where he's going to go? Any insight?
It's interesting, right? So if you look at the Westgate Superbook in Vegas, they're putting out odds on this. And it looks like right now the Patriots are still the heavy favorites for him to return to New England. I think most people are expecting him to return to New England, but it's definitely getting interesting, as we get closer to the deadline here. And you look at some of the teams that they have listed. For me, if it's not going to be New England, it's probably going to come down to about 3 teams, I think, that actually have a legitimate chance. And it's the Titans, the Raiders, and the Chargers seem to be right at the top of that list. And, if you look at the Titans...
I think we can cross the Raiders off that list.
Yeah. You know what? I don't think so either.
But I've seen the Titans come up and the Chargers, without Phillip Rivers sending him packing. You never know.
Yeah.
But, I would almost cross them off the list too.
Yeah, I don't think either one is very likely. I mean, I don't see him playing in the AFC West. Neither one of those teams are really playoff teams or really look like playoff teams right now. I'm not sure he's really wanting to go to a team like that late in his career. The Titans does make a little bit of sense because they are a playoff ready team, had a deep playoff run last year. They've got playmakers at running back and wide receiver. And then you've got the Mike Vrabel connection, former teammate of his. So that's definitely kind of interesting. So the Titans might have some legs as far as being a legitimate place for him to go. Also, the general manager is John Robinson. He comes from New England as well. So he's got some ties to some of those players and guys there. So I wouldn't be completely shocked if he pulled, a Joe Montana, so to speak, like late in his career and makes a move. Ironically, Joe Montana was his idol growing up. So
right.
Maybe he shocks us all and actually does it. It's hard to say. The Patriots definitely don't look like they used to. They definitely had a big drop off this year, I think, and they just don't look like the Super Bowl contender that they were just a few years ago. So, who knows? Maybe he shocks the world and goes to Tennessee to end his career.
Yeah. Tennessee looks like a suitable home for him, but I almost like their chances better with Tannehill. He looked like a a little more spry than a little more of a gamer. Might be a better fit in my opinion. I don't know how much Brady has left in the tank, and even more so outside of New England. I think he stays in New England, but yeah, I've seen the Titans pop up as a possible suitor, and I would imagine it's one of those two teams, but leaning heavy favorite Patriots if we're speculating.
I think so too. Yeah, I think that's, like I said, that's Vegas has them as a heavy favorite, and I think that's definitely the most likely scenario for sure.
Do you think he gets paid this time?
That's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because they've really gotten him on some friendly deals for a long time, and I'm
Yeah,
wondering, yeah, it's
yeah, a
kind of
little,
interesting to
yeah.
see if they're going to pony up the cash, late in his career here. It's definitely not the New England way, right? I mean, they kind of are notorious for underpaying guys and letting guys walk who want to get paid. So it'll be interesting. I think the money is a factor, though. It's definitely going to be interesting. And with the new CBA looming, I think that also kind of makes this a little bit murky.
Yeah, it's always been a head scratcher that man accepted, where the previous contracts that he has. Um, the big one being after I think he was a 2-time Super Bowl champion, or at least had already won the Super Bowl, and he was up for his first big time contract and fell middle of the road. It's kind of a head scratcher for a position that's such a hot commodity in the NFL. I don't care how much your wife makes. It was a head scratcher to take a pay cut there.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. But then if you look at it though, I don't think there's any chance that he gets all those rings if he's getting a huge payday, right? I mean, him going cheap really allowed the Patriots a lot of flexibility to sign guys and keep a good roster around him. So it paid off as far as, his legacy and the amount of titles and all the Super Bowl success. But yeah, it's definitely surprising. I mean, there for a while, he was like middle of the road as far as getting paid. And so,
Right.
yeah, one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time. And he's like, the 15th highest paid quarterback or whatever that was. And it's pretty wild.
Yeah, definitely makes you think. We like to question everything here on the Goonery. We're an upstart. Um, yeah, you mentioned he doesn't get all those rings if he takes a higher salary, but I wonder, if he, if his talent would translate, on any other team in the NFL besides New England. I think he is the product of that system, and maybe they had a little more leverage than you might think in that negotiation.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's kind of been the big question for a long time now, right? Is like, was it Belichick? Was it Brady? I think really it was kind of the perfect marriage of both guys. I mean, they're both, awesome in their own right, but I don't think either one of them has nearly the level of success without the other. I mean, Belichick had already been fired from Cleveland when he got to New England, and, Brady has all the success, but it's all been with Belichick. And now that kind of makes me wonder, does Brady think, hey, I'm going to shed that narrative here late in my career and show everybody that it's not just Bill Belichick and that really I am the greatest, and go play for, the Titans or somebody else and try
Would
to show
love to see
everyone.
it. Would love to
It'd
see
be
it.
fascinating, wouldn't it? It really would.
Would love to see it. All right, I can only take so much Patriots talk. Any closing, things we didn't get to with Tom Brady?
No, I think we touched on everything there for sure.
We'll
I
see.
can.
Quite the circus right now.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of media on where he's going to go. But a little bit different situation. Still seems to have it. We'll see where he goes. Moving on, we got the NFL draft coming up this year. That's pretty exciting. Looks like a lot of good quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting quarterback class, right? Because you've got there's really kind of 4 guys that stand out to me that could all be first rounders. And right now the consensus is Joe Burrow, being the number 1 pick. But if you look at these guys, they all have things that you really like about their games, but they also all have like a red flag, right? Like none of them are like the perfect, player. They've all got big question marks next to their names too. So, with Burrow, you kind of wonder, okay, he had like an historic season, right? Some say like the greatest college football season ever, but he's only done that for 1 year. Prior to this, he really wasn't anybody. So is he a one-hit wonder? Is he a guy that just, it was the perfect system?
It's such a crapshoot.
Yeah.
Isn't he like 23 too? Like
Yeah.
or like going to be 24, just some like Brandon Whedon. I don't know if that was the right guy. Some weird, getting up there in age.
Yeah, I did read, I think it was Lamar Jackson, they said was like a year or maybe 2 years younger than he is, which is pretty wild.
Ooh, Lamar, the man.
But
yeah, so we should run through the prospect list here of quarterbacks. And I don't know, do you do any games on your podcast, like compares, like we can compare this guy to someone, or just like boom or bust type of guy?
yeah, I think, like I said, I think all these guys have the potential to be really good players in the NFL, but they all
All
have
of
red
them?
flags. I think they all have potential to be, for sure. I mean, I think, Tua, if you look at Tua prior to the injury, it was the big talk was tank for Tua, right? The Dolphins were going to tank for Tua, and he was kind of the consensus number 1 pick before the injury, but and I think if he was healthy, he probably would still be the consensus number 1, right? I mean, this guy is probably the most talented of all the players in this class, but he's had 3 pretty severe injuries, not just the hip. He's had 3 bad injuries. If you
Yeah.
look at historically, guys who have injury problems in college generally have injury problems in the NFL, so there's a big red flag with Tua. Is he going to come back and look like the player we saw at Alabama? I don't know. If he does, someone's going to get a heck of a quarterback with him. But if you look at Justin Herbert out of Oregon, this guy's got all the physical tools, right? I mean, he's 6'6", big kid, rocket arm. I mean, he passes the eye test, right? I mean, he's got every physical tool, but there's something missing. Like, is he an alpha? Is he, he's like super introverted, like not really the leader type that you want from a quarterback.
Ooh.
There's kind of question marks there. And, being on the West Coast, I saw a lot of his games. And, he'll make throws that wow you. He'll make a throw into tight coverage and you go, man, that was awesome. But then the next play, all of a sudden there's a running back in the flat wide open, and he just a layup, and he, puts it over his head. And you're going, well, what the heck? It's weird almost. Like
It's a
he's
little
got
reminiscent
so much.
of a quarterback I'm pretty familiar with.
Oh, yeah. Who does that remind you of?
Mitch Trubisky from the Bears, minus the
Oh,
height. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a big laugh, I know.
Yeah, no, I don't think
No,
it's that far off in a lot of ways. I mean, Trubisky had a lot of talent. Obviously, he got drafted pretty high, and a lot of people were high on him coming out as well. But yeah, sometimes Trubisky does that, doesn't he? He misses an easy throw that you go, how do you miss that throw? But then
yeah,
he'll make a great throw, and you go, oh, okay, that's why he got drafted in the first round. It's weird.
yeah, it is very weird. But yeah, he's still football young, so we'll talk about him later in the year. Let's stick to the topic. All right, so there's another 6'6" guy from the Pac-12 coming to the NFL this year. What's his name? Eason?
Yeah, the Washington quarterback. He's interesting. I think he doesn't have a lot of experience, but he's another guy. He kind of passes the eye test as far as physically.
I'm going to go out there and say guaranteed bust. So I would stay away from him on draft day. I haven't seen any of those Huskies really amount to much in the NFL, and I'm going to use that logic. Say he's not going to make it.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not super high on him either. I can see why people are talking about him, and he's definitely going to get drafted somewhere, right? But I'm not super high on him. He, like I said, he's got the size, he's got the NFL like physical tools, but he didn't show me enough at Washington this year for me to be like, oh, that guy is going to be
Yeah,
an
I was
NFL player.
surprised to see him, as a top five potential, top five. Uh, we'll see. He's 6'6". That always stands out when you're looking these guys up and down. Another guy from Pac-12, Love. What do you think?
Are you talking about Jordan Love from
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Utah State? Yeah. Jordan Love is another guy that he kind of passes the eye test as well, right? He's 6'4", he's 224. He's got, big hands. He's athletic. He ran a 4.74 40-yard dash. He's really a natural thrower. He's got a nice, like, compact release. There's a lot to like when you watch him. But then you also look at games like he played against LSU this year. And granted, they're overmatched, but he didn't look very good. And you kind of look at that and you go, okay, well, he dominates lesser competition at Utah State, but then when he plays against, a high level competition like LSU, he really didn't look very good at all. So he's really inconsistent. He's not a very good deep ball thrower. He kind of hesitates on throws. The guy really just needs to trust his talent and let it rip. And I see too often when I watch his tape, he just, he hesitates. He makes bad decisions with the ball sometimes. He's not a very good deep ball thrower. I don't hate the kid. Don't get me wrong. I think he has a lot of talent, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's, got picked up somewhere in the late first round. Even I wouldn't be surprised if somebody picked him up there, maybe early second.
I think all these guys are going in the first round.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's definitely more than likely that he is. But like I said, he's got red flags with his game as well. They all do.
They all fucking do. I wanted to say, just for the record, that I'm big on Burrow. I think he's the man. We'll see. Obviously, nothing's a shoe-in. But, just wanted to give that Goonery endorsement over there. Tua, I don't know. Who's he going to trade? I just don't see that one panning out. Um, I, those Alabama guys they never translate well in the NFL at the quarterback position. I just haven't seen it yet. Same with the Pac-12; those quarterbacks never pan out. Well, except for Aaron Rodgers. So um, I don't know.
Yeah, it's the thing about Burrow. I mean, from this year, if you just look at this year, he was unbelievable, right? I mean, the guy just was lights out all season long. He the questions about his experience are valid, but one stat that really jumped out to me was he actually has 200 more passing attempts than Tua does, which is crazy, right? Because you would never think that with only 1 year of real, true starting experience. But that's how much they threw the ball at LSU. They really were resembled that Saints style offense, and he was awesome. I mean, he was lights out. And if he goes to Cincinnati, I think they're going to have to put in a system that suits his talents, something
Oof, that's a
similar to what
big
the Saints ran.
that's a big controversy, right? Is he going to go to Cincy, or is he going to say nope, trade me?
I wouldn't blame him if he did, right? I mean, why would you want to go to such a toxic organization that just continues to put out a losing product?
Ugh, that's a great question. We like to question things here. Um, I think he does go to Cincinnati. He is an Ohio guy, right? So
Yeah,
maybe, you know, being a little bit bigger name prospect than, these other guys might have a little more say there. Maybe he feels like he can turn that org around. I mean, they have weapons. Joe Mixon. They got some receivers that are pretty much, I don't know, kind of hit or miss, but they got receivers. Um, I don't
yeah.
know. I don't know.
AJ Green is getting a little long in the
Yeah, he's
tooth,
getting a
but
little old. John Ross, kind of a injury prone question mark. Showed some flashes this year. A little late bloomer.
right.
Boyd, uh, you know, good slot guy. Yeah, I think he goes to Cincinnati. I don't think he puts up a fight or anything.
Yeah, it seems like that's pretty much the consensus. He's pretty much a lock to go to the Bengals. The question is he good enough to overcome the dysfunction of that franchise, right?
We'll find out. We'll find out. Um, a couple other guys on this list too. Uh, Fromm, Jake Fromm.
Yeah, the Georgia quarterback, I liked him in college. But man, he really looked bad at the combine. I don't think he did himself any favors. I mean, he really struggled. The arm strength looks really bad. He really struggled with some of those like deep out routes that you need to be able to throw at the NFL level. And I think he kind of hurt his draft stock. I think he was already going to be a later round pick, but I think the combine really did him no favors at all.
Okay. Those Georgia Bulldogs, man, they come to the NFL ready to play. I feel like he's a good value. Not sure if he's, an everyday starter or ends up being a career backup, but he could surprise.
Yeah, there are some guys that, do this professionally, some of the ESPN guys and some of the big media types that follow this stuff closely. Some of them are pretty high on him, that think he could be a steal, later in the rounds. And, and other guys think he's more of a career backup type. I tend to fall more in that camp. I don't really see him as an NFL starter, but who knows? I mean, there's been guys that have gone later that ended up being stars. Obviously Brady, Russell Wilson was in the third round. I mean, guys fall sometimes and end up being really good players. So you never really know. It's all kind of a crapshoot when it comes to this stuff. But yeah, he was a good college quarterback, and he definitely showed some stuff at Georgia. There's no doubt about that.
One more guy, Jalen Hurts, on this list, falling in behind these other guys we talked about. Where do you see him going?
Hurts is a guy who I think he did the opposite of Fromm. I actually think he helped his draft stock a lot at the combine. He looked really good, and I think he shocked some people, with his throwing and his accuracy that he showed at the combine. He tested really well. He showed his mobility and his athleticism. And with the NFL kind of moving to the more modern NFL with this, more athletic quarterbacks, and guys are putting more importance on that. I think that helps him, moving into this modern era of football, being able to move, roll out of the pocket, escape the pass rush. I think those things will definitely help him. I'm not sure he's a starter at the NFL level, but he's an interesting one. He's definitely interesting. I think if you put him in the right system and the right role with the right guys around him, he could have some success. He might surprise some people.
I think he'll have a better career than RG3. That's where I'll put him right now.
Yeah, I could see that.
You think the Patriots draft a quarterback this year?
It wouldn't surprise me. The thing about drafting quarterbacks is if I was an NFL GM, I think I'd take a quarterback at least somewhere in the draft every single year.
Yeah,
I mean, why not,
I've heard
right?
that. I've heard that.
Because even if they don't pan out, you always have them as trade bait, right?
Trade chips, yeah.
So it's like
good to have a big pile of assets.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't see why they wouldn't. They were a team
good to keep your starters honest.
Yeah, and you never know, and maybe you hit on a guy. I mean, Brady was a 6th-round pick. You know? I mean,
another question mark, but
right.
A lot of things don't add up in that situation. But he is a workhorse mentality. Anyway, I hear what you're saying. It sounds like you're watching a lot of game film and following the combine quite a bit. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I try to keep up on it, especially because, like I said, I've got my new season coming up, and the first couple episodes are going to be really draft heavy. So I've been trying to really follow this stuff and get ready for that. So,
yeah, do you want to take a second to plug your pod, your social, what you're going to talk about season 2, all that?
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, yeah, for everybody, it's the Pint Glass Football Podcast. It's on all the major podcast players, Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. And you can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at PGF Podcast. I do a lot of stuff with social media. I love to interact with the fans. So, give me a follow, and, would love to hear your guys' thoughts. I do sports polls and things like that, and just love interacting with the fans for sure.
Right on. What do you talk about in season 2? Like, what do you go over?
Well, like I said, season 2, I'm going to start off in April with the NFL draft, and I'm probably going to do a lot of NFL draft coverage, probably a little bit of a preview going into the draft. And then after the draft, I like to look at each team and who they drafted and kind of break down like a grade, who I liked, who I didn't like, go over those players and who I thought had a good draft, who didn't have a good draft, and so forth.
What's a statistic, maybe not a statistic, attribute? What do you look for that, might make you a little higher on a prospect? What do you value when you're prospecting players in your own head?
It's interesting because I feel like each position group has certain things that you want to look for. I think with the combine, if you're looking at wide receivers or cornerbacks, speed position players, a 40-yard dash time is really important, right? But like if your left tackle doesn't run a good 40, it's like, who cares? That doesn't really matter, So it's really player dependent and player group dependent. For an offensive lineman, I'm going to look more at like bench press, and I'm going to look at like, things like that, more power type drills, strength drills, things. Does he move his feet well? Does he have the right height? Does he have a good length? Arm length, it matters when you're looking at like left tackles, things like that, so it just depends on the player, in the group, of course. But the main thing is the tape. The combine's great because it kind of lets you look and see, okay, how athletic are these guys? But really it comes back to the game film. What did they do on Saturday? Are they a player? Because there's a lot of guys who don't put up great combine numbers and they go on to be Hall of Fame players. So it's not all about the combine for sure. I think it just helps solidify guys, or at least show the scouts like, okay, is he as fast as we think he is, or is he as strong as we think he is, and so forth. But really for me, it's what did they do on Saturday?
Yeah. Okay. The Saturday game.
Yeah,
I got
for sure.
When I always used to play a lot of franchise mode in Madden as a kid, always would value speed and youth when drafting and signing my players. But I don't know if that really translate well to current day. But something I want to explore more, in our sports conversations, just kind of getting down into those advanced stats that, you see all these quarterbacks or these players, and they look like head scratchers, anywhere from halfway through the season to, first couple of years. And, in the world of algorithms, wondering, if there is ways to find, a sure fit talent versus, the roll of the dice.
Yeah, it's so hard to say. Like I said, you look at guys. Like I was reading an interesting stat the other day about wide receivers, and I think somebody was saying that like there's like one or two, or anyway, not very many guys in the Hall of Fame who ran like under a 4.4, right, 40-yard dash. But yet we all freak out when the guy at the combine runs like a 4.3, and everyone's like, "Oh man, he's a burner," and it's like, yeah, that's cool,
Right.
but look how many guys ran 4.5s that are in the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, and look at all the guys that are on the top of the speed list and who are not in the Hall of Fame or even close.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I think the biggest thing is you kind of take it with a grain of salt. It's nice to see the measurables, but you can't put too much weight on that. You look at a guy like, Juju Smith-Schuster, right? Just a couple years ago, he ran a slow
sore subject for me.
He ran a slow 40 time, right? And he slipped in the draft.
Yeah.
And then the Steelers get him, and he ends up being a really good player. So,
well, let No, I hear you. He was awesome. The year before this last year. I mean, he didn't have Big Ben, but you know,
Sure.
sure made me look like a fool in the fantasy draft. No, anyway, I don't mind showing a little bias on here. But I hear what you're saying. With that being said, we got a few minutes left. Sports betting, ever increasing in popularity and legality. So, how do you make money betting on sports?
Well, gosh, it's hard, right? Because I mean, you look at it, if you're winning, 55% of your picks, you're killing it, right? I mean, it's just hard to make money in it. But
Yeah, that's the consensus, right? It's pretty hard to make money, and you got to gamble on a lot of different sports that you might not be as accustomed to. A lot of stats you're digging through.
yeah, I've kind of got some things that I look at. I don't bet a lot of sports other than football because it's really my bread and butter. Some of the things that I kind of stick to, like my football betting rules, if you will,
Sure.
would be I always fade the public. The public is always wrong, right? The sharp money is always on the other side, right? If everyone loves, the Chiefs, for instance, then you go with the other team 9 times out of 10, right? Um, I don't bet teams, I bet lines. So
Right.
when I'm looking at the lines, I don't care what logo is next to that line. I don't care what their record is. If they're getting 7.5 points, I love it, right? They're getting more than a touchdown, especially in the NFL, right? The NFL, the average margin of victory is so razor thin that if you're getting points in general, I'm usually on your side. I don't like to lay points in the NFL. Now, college is a little different. I'll lay points in college quite a bit because there's a lot bigger mismatches. You see a lot more blowouts in college, but you don't see a ton of blowouts in the NFL, right? I mean, the games are generally pretty close. So if I'm going to get points, that's usually something I lean on. I love a home dog, right? If you got a team it's home and they're the underdog, I'll take them all day. I also like to look at teams that, like, let's say a team gets smoked one week. I usually like that team the next week because the public usually will fade that team because we have short memories, right? We see a team get smoked on Monday Night Football or something. And the next week, like, oh man, the Texans got smoked. I don't want to bet them. Well, they're most likely going to bounce back, right? Because they're fired up. They just got embarrassed. So usually they're going to put out a really good effort the next week. So I love to jump on those type of lines, take advantage of those. I also like to look at teams like, do they have a big home field advantage? Teams like Seattle, Kansas City, even the Steelers, New Orleans, do they have a big home field advantage? Or on the other side of the coin, like the Chargers, their home field has been miserable. So, like, is the other team going to be, if the Chargers are playing someone like the Steelers or the Bears or someone with a big fan base, they're going to pack that place and it's going to be basically like they're playing on the road. So sometimes I'll look at things like that to influence my decision on a game.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of what you've said. Betting week to week. The games are closer than we think. Teams, do seem to get fired up after an embarrassing loss, unless it's. But yeah. When you're given points in the NFL, that's an interesting take. Definitely have to consider that. Do you do any predictions? Do you do anything like that?
Yeah, so I like to I do a lot of game previews. So usually I'll have a podcast episode that comes out in the middle of the week. And so I like to preview a lot of the games that are going to be coming up on that Saturday or that Sunday. And if I'm focusing on a handful of games, I always like to pick who I like, from a betting standpoint. So I'll do my preview, and then at the end of it, I'll be like, oh, and by the way, I'm taking 49ers plus 3.5, or whatever, and just let the people know, like, hey, for what it's worth, that's who I've got. That's who I'm putting my money on.
Right on. And last question is, betting legal in your state? Where are you from?
Yeah, so I'm actually in Oregon.
Oh,
So
okay, right on.
yeah, so I'm just south of you here in the Northwest,
Just
and
down I-5 there.
yep, exactly. And yeah, betting just recently became sports betting just recently became legal. They've got like an app now that you can bet games on, and so that's pretty cool. I used to do the offshore betting. It's nice
Yeah.
that I don't have to do that anymore. You used to get a check with like Asian writing on it and stuff, but not anymore.
For our listeners that aren't familiar with offshore betting, you want to run through that process real quick?
Well, there used to be websites that before all this happened, you'd
Right.
find these offshore sites. They were usually based somewhere in Asia, and you'd make your bet. And I remember the first time I did that, I thought, man, this is crazy because it's like totally a gray area, right? It's like not really legal, but they found a loophole, so it kind of works. And then, you end up winning, and I win my first bet doing this, and I get this check from them, and I look at it, I'm like,
In
this is
yen.
nuts. Yeah, it's all like Asian writing, and I'm like, this is crazy. But sure enough, it cashed at the bank, so that's all that matters, right?
Oh, fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
Cool, man. All right, we're about to sign off here, but anything else you wanted to cover before we say sayonara?
Well, no, I just wanted to tell you, I really appreciate the opportunity again. I think it was really cool to talk to you. We've been following each other on social media, and it was cool to put a voice to the guy that I've been following on there. And I really like the show, and I hope I hope your listeners enjoyed it, and hopefully they'll come check out my pod. And maybe down the road when I start season 2, you can come join me on my podcast.
Sounds like a plan. Appreciate you coming on. That's
Hey, thanks a bunch.
Brad Fowler, ladies and gentlemen, from Pint Glass Football Podcast. Give it a listen.